The NBA Draft Combine is coming up this weekend. A foursome of Tigers are getting set to represent Auburn on the big stage and try to make their names heard in the NBA world. I'm Jacob Hillman, your host of the Barn Hoops podcast right here on the Barn Auburn Network, as we are presented by mybookie.ag. You can get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 by using the coupon code BARN at checkout. So visit mybookie.ag for a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 for your upcoming gambling needs. All right, as we talk about this NBA Draft Combine coming up and this weekend in Chicago at Wintrust Arena, it's a really important weekend for the likes of Johni Broome and Tahaad Pettiford. We start off with Johni Broome, as he is the guy we know is going to stay in the NBA draft, and I think that it's very important for him to go out and show that he is like the National Player of the Year that he was this past season, and that can translate to the NBA ranks. And he is kind of in the mix of that first round range in the mock drafts that are out right now, the most up-to-date ones. Bleacher Report has him going 33rd to the Charlotte Hornets. ESPN has him going 38th to the San Antonio Spurs to join Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the NBA draft lottery does come out on Monday, and I think that's going to play a big factor in how these NBA mock drafts and the actual draft itself shakes out. Obviously, that will be updated. All of those mock drafts that are currently out are going to be shaken up quite a bit when that lottery result comes out and we see who is going to get the top 16 picks. And that shakes down all the way to the second round and who these teams pick, because you don't know who they might, whether it's the Charlotte Hornets or the Washington Wizards. They might grab someone they didn't expect to get in the first 15 picks of the NBA draft. And that might, that's going to mean someone in the second round doesn't get drafted at that point because the Wizards or the Hornets or whoever is in this lottery process got that need early in the first round. I want to talk about the former National Player of the Years, the big men that Johni Broome kind of compares with. I talk about Zach Edey. He won National Player of the Year in the previous 2 seasons. And before that, it was Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky. And then even prior to that, Luka Garza with Iowa. He won back-to-back National Player of the Year awards. And all of these guys play the game a little differently. And I look at Johni Broome as a finesse big man. And he doesn't shoot a ton of threes. And when he did, he came through in the clutch at times. You think back to that Michigan State game after coming back from that injury, the Willis Reed moment that Coach Bruce Pearl called it and many alluded to. And then you look at the Alabama game at Neville Arena and in Coleman Coliseum, quite frankly. In Neville Arena, he hit 2 huge threes in overtime that were absolutely clutch and much needed for the Auburn Tigers in that game. It obviously didn't result in the win that Auburn wanted, but he hit a 3 right at the start of overtime to set the tone, and then he tied the game with 15 seconds to go in overtime. And then going back to February 15th in Tuscaloosa, he started off hitting 2 threes in the first few minutes of that ball game. And again, setting the tone from the 3-point shooting, and that opened everything up for Johni Broome in that game. I really think that the 3-point shooting is not the most crucial thing for him when it comes to the NBA and his outlook there and what scouts see and everything that goes into that, because we know what Johni can do from 3. He can give you 1 or 2 a game, but he's not going to be that prolific shooter that you might expect from the NBA ranks. But that doesn't mean that he can't have an impact in the NBA. Look at Zach Edey. Zach Edey this season has been or was a critical piece for the Memphis Grizzlies, drafted number 9 overall in the draft last season. And he showed that. He showed why he was worthy of that draft pick for the Grizzlies this year. He was a rookie and a big man. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes, and he didn't need to. And that's because as much as people think the NBA is just this 3-point shooting league, there are ways to to play without that. And that is what Zach Edey showed this season. Going back to 2021 to 22, Oscar Tshiebwe was, not your typical big man. He was more similar to Zach Edey, where he is just grabbing rebounds left and right. And that's why he won National Player of the Year in that season. And if you remember, he came into Auburn. That was the game against Walker Kessler, Jabari Smith that catapulted the Tigers into the #1 ranking for the first time in program history. Tshiebwe was a great player that year, and he even came back after that season and played his senior year at Kentucky. That was the first of two. That season where he came back his senior year was the first of 2 Player of the Years for Zach Edey. And but Tshiebwe, he went undrafted. That's the difference there. You've got a high lottery pick in Edey, and then you've got the undrafted like Oscar Tshiebwe. Falling right in the middle of them is the Luka Garza type. He won back-to-back National Player of the Years, and he was drafted 52nd overall in the NBA draft after his 2021 season. And when I stack it all up and look at the difference between Johni Broome, Zach Edey, Oscar Tshiebwe, and a Luka Garza, I mentioned it earlier. I think Johni's more of a finesse man. He is not. He can go to the bucket and use his strength to get baskets that way and open up the offense, but that is not his MO. He wants to use a spin move. That spin move was deadly all year long against especially the less athletic centers and power forwards that he faced, and he was able to use that constantly. Obviously, Johni's going to have to continue to get more athletic if he's going to use those kinds of moves in the NBA against centers like a Nikola Jokic and a Joel Embiid and so on and so on. But again, I go back to Zach Edey. I think he is the prototype now for how a center that doesn't shoot the three well can translate to the NBA and become a critical piece for a team. The Grizzlies needed that, and he gave it to them this year. Made a playoff appearance and did advance past first round, but still Zach Edey was part of that run. And then Oscar Tshiebwe and Luka Garza, they have not panned out in the NBA. That's just how it is. They have both lived in the G League a little bit, and that is part of being undrafted or a second round draft pick, as Tshiebwe and Luka Garza were. So looking at the numbers from their careers and their final seasons or the National Player of the Year seasons or the last National Player of the season in Zach Edey and Luka Garza's case, obviously Oscar Tshiebwe using his junior year as an example. But, Garza and Edey were big-time scorers, 25 and 24 points per game for Edey and Garza in their Player of the Year seasons. And then Tshiebwe and Broome were 18 and 17 points per game. All 4 of these guys were north of 50% from the field. Garza was really the only one that shot the three, and he did it pretty well. Broome shot more than Edey and Tshiebwe, but his 3-point percentage was sub 30%. That's not a great percentage at all, and I don't think it's going to cost Johni too much. Obviously, if he were shooting 35+%, he would be in the lottery conversation, but I don't think that this is going to be this big conversation about Johni Broome as, he can't shoot 3. He's never going to translate to the NBA. I think it's how do you use his strong points, his strengths, and that is his finesse. And it's also the way he passes the ball and distributes. So in these 4 seasons, Johni Broome, he averaged 2.9 assists per game. Zach Edey averaged 2.0 assists per game. Oscar Tshiebwe was at 1.1 assists per game, and Garza was 1.7 assists per game in those National Player of the Year seasons. And that was the most assists per game in Broome's career, and those are all career highs for each of the 3 others that I've referenced and am using for this conversation, because I think that what you see out of Edey and Garza is that they're score-first centers. When they get the ball, they are looking to get fouled or back down whoever is guarding them or get past them to the basket. Oscar Tshiebwe, same deal. Johni Broome, on the other hand, we saw some wicked passes from him this season. I recall several where he would throw one from the low block to the corner to Miles Kelly. What about when he went against Tennessee and missed the go-ahead layup got his own rebound, and had the presence to get it out to the corner to Miles Kelly, and he knocks down the go-ahead and eventually the game-winning three-pointer. That is the kind of player the NBA wants. I'm not comparing him to Nikola Jokic, but that is the style of play you want out of a center. Jokic obviously shoots the three a little bit better, but I mean, just last night or 2 nights ago in game one of the Western Conference semifinals, Nikola Jokic went absolutely bananas. He had 6 assists in that game, but he also had 22 rebounds. He was, I think, the 4th NBA player all time with whatever stat line he had. And that was just, incredible to watch. And those are the kind of performances that I think prove to the NBA and fans and scouts and whoever is taking in that product that it doesn't have to just be a straight up stretch 5. You see what a Joel Embiid does. Giannis Antetokounmpo is not necessarily your typical center. He is as big as one, but he is he's ball dominant, and he does that. So I don't put him in this conversation as much as I do the other 2 guys. And I think that Johni Broome again, he just has that it factor in him. You go back to that Michigan State game in the Elite 8 and him coming back out of the locker room after that injury to his elbow when he knew there was no ligament damage or everything was fine. It just hurt. That it was as simple as that. He knew that's all it was. He was hurting, but he knew that his team needed him. He got back in the game. He got that one-handed rebound, and then he went and knocked down that 3, and that really, I thought, stuck the dagger in Michigan State, and Auburn was able to hold on from there. Zach Edey, Oscar Tshiebwe, Luka Garza don't have that kind of ability in a game to really distribute and be the playmaker that Johni Broome has been in his past 2 years. Johni's averaged north of 2 assists per game over his last 2 seasons, and I think that's a very impressive number. It's not necessarily the number that you would expect from a center. I think that he's made it a point to come out and be that kind of playmaker because he knows what the NBA is looking for at this time, and he knows it's also the 3-point shooting, and that's just something that's going to have to come along as he continues to improve and as he continues to work out and gets in training camps wherever that may be. So again, I think Johni Broome, after this upcoming week, the NBA draft combine begins next Monday, that it's very important. And, it's not necessarily the agility, his measurables or anything like that. He's big enough. He might not be a center in the NBA, but he can be that kind of combo 4-5. And again, we see the Spurs mock draft that if he's playing alongside Victor Wembanyama, that would be that'd be a wild combination. I feel like to watch. It'd be a fun one to watch as well. And I think that the key for Johni in the NBA draft combine is how he performs in the scrimmages. And it's, like I said, not the measurables. It's not his bench press or his agility and whatnot. Those are all important as well. But I think where he is going to see the most eyeballs on him will be in those scrimmages to see, all right, is this playmaking ability there with new teammates? And obviously, he doesn't have any time to practice with these guys, and this will be the first time that he's playing with most of them. But it's still important to be out there, and these scouts know what they're looking for. They know what to look for in Johni's game as well as everyone else that's on the floor. So I expect to see him go out and do his thing. And again, I keep going back to the 3-point shot because that's going to be the conversation from some fans, but I think that he can really offset that with his playmaking ability. And speaking of the NBA draft combine and playmaking ability, Tahaad Pettiford, he will be in Chicago as well with Johni Broome and trying to improve his stock. He obviously was a freshman. He can still come back to Auburn, and quite frankly, we hope we do. ESPN's Jonathan Givony, he was in Santa Barbara with Pettiford over the last couple of weeks, watching him get ready for that draft combine. And there's about a 2.5-minute video that Givony posted on his Twitter and X at Draft Express that is an interesting conversation about Pettiford's outlook and what he is trying to accomplish in Chicago next week. And that really has to do with trying to show these NBA scouts, one, he's not too small, and two, that his playmaking is clean enough for the NBA, that his three-point shot has cleaned up. And obviously the comparison, I'm going to do a similar exercise that we just did with Johni Broome, but it's going to be with former Auburn point guards that left early for the NBA in Sharife Cooper and Jared Harper. But Tahaad last season, it's a difficult comparison to make just because Tahaad was your sixth man off the bench. Sharife was obviously a bona fide starter on that 2021 Auburn basketball team and only played 12 games. Jared Harper he was a veteran, but he left 1 year early with 1 year of eligibility left. And he also had high usage. Pettiford had valid usage, 22, almost 23 minutes per game, but he wasn't starting, and he was that spark plug. So when he came in the game, it almost felt like, all right, he's coming in to score and start the offense, and it was just part of a rotation. He and Shane Johnson checked in every game, it felt like, at the same exact time. And that's just the way the rotations work for Coach Pearl and the staff. But I do think it is worth noting that, Sharife Cooper and Jared Harper, Jared was undrafted. Sharife Cooper was the 48th overall pick. And both of them got NBA minutes, but it was very limited. Both of them less than 20 games played in the NBA and have now eventually gone overseas and are dominating overseas. They're having great careers in the professional ranks overseas and in Europe and Israel and whatnot. But that's not the NBA. That's what Tahaad Pettiford wants to, that's where he wants to be. He doesn't want to go overseas. He wants to be in the NBA. And I go back to the combine. Sharife Cooper had no official measurables for the NBA draft combine in 2021 after he left Auburn. Jared Harper, he was measured at 5'11" with shoes on. That's one of those things that a lot of NBA scouts are going to look at and just say it's too short. That's nothing you can do about that other than and prove them wrong. And my opinion, I think Jared Harper had what it took to potentially be in the NBA as a role player. Same with Sharife Cooper, but the NBA didn't see it the same way. So what does Tahaad Pettiford have to do next week to prove otherwise? And it comes down to the playmaking and I think the shooting as well. Pettiford, he shot 36.6% from three this past season. Sharife Cooper, in his 12 games at Auburn, very short amount of time, was 22.8% from three. Jared Harper was just barely better than Pettiford in his final year at Auburn at 37% from three. And the difference between Pettiford and Harper was that Pettiford's field goal percentage from all over was 42.1%, and Harper was just under 40% at 39.9%. So it's just it's a case of give and take. And Pettiford's and again, I think the points per game kind of line up with the usage of all of these guys. Cooper, now you look at the assists per game, that's where he made his money is he averaged 8.1 assists per game, 5.8 for Harper, 3.0 for Tahaad Pettiford. And that is the reason Cooper was given a shot with the Atlanta Hawks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And obviously it didn't work out for him. He's overseas, again, dominating, just like Jared Harper is. Jared Harper, Bryce Brown, and Austin Wiley are on the same team or are in the same league together in Israel, which is very cool to see. But goes back to say, looking at mock drafts again, Tahaad Pettiford, CBS Sports has him going 30th to the Los Angeles Clippers. That's the final pick of the first round. The Athletic has him going 32nd to the Celtics, and ESPN has him going 39th to the Raptors. I expect so much of this to change after next week once the lottery results are out and then the combine has been completed. And we will have to see what the results are from Tahaad Pettiford and Johni Broome to see just if it makes them climb into the first round or whatnot. Another interesting bit from the Jonathan Givony video with Tahaad Pettiford. It was a quick interview, 2.5 minutes or so. Tahaad mentioned he is trying to climb the ranks and get a guaranteed contract from somebody. I think he wants to hear an NBA team tell him that we are going to take you if you're available in the first round. And that obviously that is very possible. I think Pettiford has that kind of talent. I think he has the size. I do think he is just a few inches taller than Sharife and Jared Harper, and that makes all the difference in the world to the NBA. That's just how it is. So obviously, selfishly, I want to see Tahaad Pettiford back in an Auburn jersey next season. I think it's a huge key for next season's team to have him back, an experienced point guard, a guy who was a part of the Final Four team. And again, you talk about the culture of an Auburn basketball team. You don't have Dylan Cardwell. We're going to talk about him in a minute. You don't have Chris Moore anymore. And you don't have a Johni Broome who played 3 years at Auburn. Those guys are gone. They are off to bigger and better things after graduating from Auburn. And Tahaad Pettiford, he could make a big difference on the team next year that is going to be a brand new team with hopefully the exception of him. And with that being said, there's a couple of other guys that are going to be up in Chicago this weekend, hoping to get an invite to the official NBA Draft Combine. So the NBA G League Elite Camp will take place Friday through Sunday in Chicago, and the top performers will receive invites to the Draft Combine next week. Those two from Auburn will be Dylan Cardwell and Miles Kelly. Dylan Cardwell obviously was one of, if not the best defensive player in the country last year, and there were plenty of opposing coaches that made that clear that he was just a difficult guy to game plan for. Now, the question mark is, what kind of offensive skills can he show to the NBA and specifically to the G League? Because I think that would have to be Dylan's route is go through the G League and develop some skills there, especially on the offensive end, while continuing to prove his stout defense, and then hopefully get a call up at some point to the NBA. And then Miles Kelly, he's a prototype kind of guy for the NBA. I feel like he's got a lot of length. He is tall, he is long, his wingspan. I can't wait to see the measurements on that. And then we know the 3-point shooting that he is capable of. Obviously, he lit Rupp Arena on fire to clinch the SEC championship for Auburn at the beginning of March. And then when he came back in the NCAA tournament against Alabama State, continued that fireball in that game. And then you go back to just the first game of the season against Vermont, where he made 7 threes, and that was only topped by that Kentucky game later in the season. So it'll be very interesting to see what comes of that G League Elite Camp in Chicago this weekend for Dylan Cardwell and Miles Kelly. I think that they are both capable of being invited to that next week of activities. There's a ton going on. It's a whole week. It's May 11th through the 18th. So there is not a lack of activity going on in Chicago for these NBA hopefuls, especially Johni Broome and Tahaad Pettiford, who know they will be there for that length of time. Now, I'm sure it involves plenty of workouts and plenty of interviews and conversations with NBA GMs, executives, scouts, you name it, head coaches that will be in attendance. And Dylan Cardwell and Miles Kelly hope to get that invitation to join Tahaad and Johni in Chicago, or at least extend their stay past this upcoming Sunday and then stay there for the rest of the week. And again, Dylan Cardwell and Kelly are both guys that, you go back to last season, Miles Kelly was, a year ago today, was not even committed to Auburn. He was in the NBA draft process at that point, and then he eventually withdrew his name. That withdrawal deadline this year is June 15th, by the way. So if we get to June and Tahaad Pettiford hasn't withdrawn, exactly what day to look forward to and when he needs to do that by, if he's going to come back to Auburn. Dylan Cardwell obviously played 5 years at Auburn, and I think his story is just so incredible, and I think that NBA scouts are going to love it because of the way he stuck with Auburn, even without getting the large number of minutes that he could have gotten at a different school. He could have been a starter pretty much wherever he wanted to, but he stuck with Johni Broome, and Coach Pearl and the staff promised that he would be a starter this past season. He trusted him, and he stuck with it. And then Johni was obviously okay with that. I think that's a bump to Johni's his resume as well, of how just Dylan's a team guy. He's team first, and he's willing to do whatever role he is asked of, and he's a team leader. You go back to that weekend in Lexington in the first and second round of the NCAA tournament, and free breakfast was was what Dylan Cardwell wanted to keep playing for, and they did all the way to the Final Four. So I'm looking forward to seeing the performances that Johni Broome, Tahaad Pettiford, Dylan Cardwell, and Miles Kelly put up in Chicago this upcoming weekend, and how that translates to the mock drafts, and hopefully it results, like I said, in an NBA draft combine invite for Dylan Cardwell and Miles Kelly. And obviously the drafts in these sports are just some of the most, they bring a lot of intrigue. You look at the NFL draft last month, and what happened with that, what transpired with Shedeur Sanders and all the trades that happened in the first round. It's impossible to predict what can happen in these drafts. And it doesn't just happen in the NFL. It happens here in the NBA as well as Major League Baseball and the NHL. So we'll keep an eye on that as we move forward. But with that coming up, I figured it'd be good to give a little preview of what to expect. And hopefully a guy like Johni Broome can move his way into that first round conversation and be another first round pick for the Auburn Tigers. Bruce Pearl, obviously, talking about making history. That's something Johni Broome can do for the Auburn Tigers. So thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Barn Hoops podcast. There's so much going on the Barn Auburn Network, as Auburn baseball is in the top 5 in the nation after that series win in Knoxville against a top 10 Tennessee team. So tune in for that. Kyle Rush, Charlie 5, has his Top Button podcast. He covers all the happenings in Auburn athletics, and the Village Vice with Zach Blackerby and Brad Law. They do the same over there. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and tune in for more. As I won't have a show this the rest of this week. Got some obligations with Auburn baseball hosting South Carolina for its home finale series, but hoping to come back with 2 episodes a week going forward. And we'll continue to talk about the NBA draft and where Johni Broome might land, or where Dylan Cardwell, Miles Kelly will hopefully land. That's not to mention, a guy like Denver Jones and Chaney Johnson. What kind of conversations surround those guys going into the NBA draft? And then we'll get into some off-season topics, whether that's a schedule wish list, or ranking games from the past 15 years of Neville Arena. And last season was the 15th for Neville Arena. So we've officially hit the mid-teenage years of that building, which has been so magical for the entirety of it. So and also one correction I want to mention, last episode we talked about that Arizona series coming out this year. It actually starts in Tucson this upcoming year before Arizona makes a return trip. So today also, Purdue released its non-conference schedule. The game against Auburn in Gainbridge Arena in Indianapolis is set for December 20th. So maybe you go spend your Christmas up in Indianapolis and be an Auburn witness. But that's going to do it for the Barn Hoops podcast right here on the Barn Auburn Network. We look forward to talking to you next time.